what is place of supply and what is its relevance under the GST law? As we all know that when there is a supply of goods or a service, there is a supplier and there is a recipient. Supplier, and he pays the consideration. So what is the meaning, the sense of this place of supply? This GST law has been introduced with the concept of consumption-based tax. That is, the tax will flow to the state or the territory where this goods or services actually consumed. So it is important to determine where the goods or service which is supplied, where is this ultimately being consumed. The state, if it is being consumed within India, that is, if it is being consumed within the same state of the supplier, then it will attract a local tax, that is CGST and SGST. If it is being consumed in any other state or a union territory, then it becomes an intrastate levy. Then in that case, the tax applicable will be IGST, and the applicable tax will flow to that state or the union territory where this service is ultimately being consumed. And if this service is being supplied outside India, that is a non-taxable territory, then that becomes a zero-rated supply, and it will be termed as export, and the applicable GST is, there is no liability for payment of GST. So the place of supply is a very important concept which needs to be checked in the case of every contract which is being received by your client. How does it has an impact? You will see it forward. So this interstate supply has been defined under Section 7, subsection 3 of this IGST Act, which says that subject to the provision of Section 12, the supply of service, where the location of the supplier and the place of supply are in two different states or different union territories, or a state and a union territory, shall be treated as supply of services in the course of interstate trade or commerce. So if you can see in this provision, there is no reference to a recipient of service. There is a supplier and there is a place of supply. The supplier has a location, and the service or the goods, whichever the place where this service is being consumed, that becomes a place of supply, and that will decide whether this supply is an interstate supply or an intrastate supply. So if the location of the supplier and the place of supply are in different states or in different union territory, or in one in a state and one in another union territory, that becomes a supply in the course of interstate trade and commerce. And in that case, the applicable tax will be IGST, with the selection of the place of supply of particular state or union territory where the service is being consumed. And what is an intrastate supply, which has been defined under Section 8, subsection 2, which says, subject to the provisions of Section 12, supply of services where the location of the supplier and the place of supply of services are in the same state or same union territory shall be treated as intrastate supply. Again, there is no reference to the recipient. There are only two persons involved. That there are two things involved. That is, one is the supplier and another is the place of supply. If both the things are in the same state or the same union territory, that becomes an intrastate supply, and the applicable tax will be CGST and SGST. This definition becomes very important in the case of works contract service, because as we know that there are contractors who are providing services across India, and there are various contractors that are providing services outside India also. But the recipient may be in your same state or the state other than the state where this service is being provided. So that will have an impact on the tax which you are charging, and also have an impact on the flow of input tax credit for the recipient. That is a very important thing which we find that it is being neglected in many cases. So it is a very important thing which we will be taking forward. Provided that the intrastate supply of services shall not include supply of services to or by SEZ developer or an SEZ unit. Of course, that becomes an export. Now, as we have seen, what is an intrastate supply and what is an intrastate supply? So how do we decide now where is this place of supply? Because we know if we are a supplier, we know where is the supplier. That is our own establishment, the place of our establishment, the place of business. But now we need to decide where is this place of supply. So to decide the place of supply, we need to refer to the recipient, the location of the recipient. If the both supplier and recipient the location of both supplier and the recipient is in India. This situation has been covered under section 12 subsection 2 for a normal service. The place of supply of service except the services specified under subsection 3 to 14 made to a registered person shall be the location of such person. Means if the service is supplied to a registered recipient, the place of supply shall be location of such recipient. Made to a person other than registered person shall be location of the recipient where the address on his record and the location of the supplier of service in other cases. So if you have a location, if you are having the address of the recipient on record, then the address of the recipient will be the location of place of supply. And if you do not have any address, then the location of the supplier will be, it means that it will be deemed that the supplier has been, the service has been supplied at that place only, that is at the place of the supplier. And that will decide the place of supply of that service. But is it same in the case of a supply of service related to an immovable property? That is in the case of works contract as in this situation. This situation has been covered under section 12 subsection 3 where it says the place of supply of services directly in relation to an immovable property, including services provided by architects, interior decorators, surveyors, engineers and other related experts or estate agents. Any service provided by way of grant of right to use immovable property or for carrying out or coordination of construction work. Clause D. Any services ancillary to the services provided in Clause A shall be the location at which the immovable property or boat or vessel as the case may be is located or intended to be located. Very important. You can see that there is no reference to the location of the recipient as it was in section 12 subsection 2. Because if there is a normal supply of service, in that case location of the recipient becomes the place of supply. But in the case of a service which is directly in relation to an immovable property, in that case the place of supply will be the location at which the immovable property is located. This is very important and the point which should be noted and should be verified in case of every contract of your client. Provided that if the location of immovable property or boat or vessel is located or intended to be located outside India, the place of supply shall be the location of recipient. What are we talking about? If you see the heading of this slide, it says where the location of supplier and recipient both is in India, but the location of the immovable property is outside India. So you may believe that because the service is being provided outside India, this is an export and GST is not applicable. But no, as per this proviso, if both the supplier and recipient is in India and the service is provided, the works contract service is being provided outside India, even then the place of supply will be the location of the recipient, that is in India, and the GST is applicable on this service. Very important thing. We can discuss this with some illustrations as you can see in the screen. The first situation is if the location of the supplier is in Odisha and location of the recipient is in the same state of Odisha, plus the location of immovable property is also in Odisha. So what will be the place of supply? I hope there is no chat box, so I cannot interact with you all. But in this case, the place of supply is Odisha. In every situation, you will see that the location of the immovable property is important. In this case, the recipient is also in Odisha and the property is also in Odisha. So the place of supply is Odisha and the tax applicable will be the local tax, that will be CGST and SGST. Then if the supplier and recipient are in different state, supplier in Odisha, recipient is in Jharkhand and the immovable property is in Jharkhand. In that case, the place of supply is Jharkhand and the tax applicable will be IGST. Third situation. This is a crucial situation that when the location of supplier is in Odisha, location of recipient is in Jharkhand, but the location of immovable property is in Odisha. So where is the place of supply now? As per this section 12 subsection 3, the place of supply becomes Odisha. Even if the recipient is in Jharkhand, he is in different state, but the place of supply in this case will be Odisha and the applicable tax will be CGST and SGST. and if the tax applicable is CGST and SGST, and the recipient in Jharkhand wants to take input tax credit of this tax, whether he will be able to take that input tax credit, that is a big problem. And in that case, the recipient needs to plan his registration in order to claim the input tax credit. Fourth situation, the supplier is in Odisha, the recipient is in Odisha, but the location of immoral property is in Jharkhand. Now the place of supply becomes Jharkhand and the tax applicable is IGST. The supplier will charge IGST with place of supply as Jharkhand, but the recipient is in Odisha. Whether he will be able to claim that input tax credit? Again, if there are three different states where the supplier is in Odisha, recipient is in Jharkhand, and the immoral property is in West Bengal, that is a third state. So in that case also, the place of supply becomes West Bengal and the tax applicable is IGST. Now the sixth situation, which is a very critical situation, where the supplier is in Odisha, recipient is in West Bengal, but the construction service is being provided in Bangladesh. That is outside India. But both the supplier and recipient are in India. So what will be the place of supply? Whether this is an export of service? No. As we discussed in the provision of that section 12 subsection 3, that becomes a local service provided in India at the location of the recipient. Now the place of supply will become West Bengal and the tax will be chargeable on this supply. Now moving forward, another situation where either of this supplier or recipient is outside India. Earlier, there we covered through section 12 where the situation was both the supplier and recipient of the services are in India. Now the another section covers the situation where either of the supplier or the recipient are outside India. Now what will happen? Whether all the services in this case will become an export of service? Let's see. In this section 13 subsection 4 says, the place of supply of services supplied directly in relation to an immovable property, including services supplied in this regard by experts and estate agents, supply of accommodation by hotel, inn, guest house, club or campsite by whatever name called, grant of rights to use immovable property, services for carrying out or coordination of construction work, including that of architect or interior decorators, shall be the place where the immovable property is located or intended to be located. So in this case also, if either of the supplier or the recipient is outside India, the place of supply shall be the location of the immovable property located or intended to be located. So let's discuss this with again some situations. Situation number 1, where the supplier is in India and the recipient of that service is in Bangladesh and the construction service is provided to an immovable property in Bangladesh. In that case, the place of supply is the location of immovable property. That is, the place of supply becomes Bangladesh. India, outside the taxable territory, this becomes an export of service. And if it is an export of service, there is no tax applicable. You may go with payment of tax or without payment of tax and opt for the refunds, refund route, whichever you want, find it possible for you. Second situation, if the supplier of service is in Bangladesh and the location of recipient is in India, but the location of the immovable property is in Bangladesh. So the supplier is in Bangladesh, the property is in Bangladesh, the recipient is in India. So the place of supply becomes Bangladesh, and as the place of supply is in Bangladesh and supplier is also outside India, there cannot be a levy in that case. Third situation, if the supplier is in India, the recipient is in India, but the location of that immovable property is in Bangladesh, what will happen in this case? In this case, the location of this, there is a mistake in my slide. The place of supply in this case will be Bangladesh, and that will become an export of service, and there is no GST applicable in this case. There was an advance ruling in a situation, a very interesting situation, where the Maldives government gave a contract for construction of a government building in Maldives to NBCC in India. NBCC is a government organization, National Board of Construction Construction Corporation in India, which got a contract from the Maldives government for construction of an immovable property in Maldives. NBCC subcontracted this to a person in India, to a contractor in India, who was given contract for construction of this government building in Maldives. So this person, the contractor, goes to Maldives for construction of this immovable property, and for this purpose, he will raise an invoice to NBCC because the supplier of service is in India, that is the contractor, and the recipient in this case, immediate recipient for that contract is NBCC, which is also in India. But the place of supply is the immovable property located in Maldives that becomes outside India. So this becomes an export of service. GST not applicable. Now NBCC will raise an invoice on Maldives government because now the NBCC becomes a supplier of service and the recipient becomes Maldives government, and the location of that immovable property is also in Maldives. In that case also, that becomes an export of service, so GST is not applicable. So these are the type of situations which actually happen and which we need to see in each and every situation, whether that service is provided within your state or intrastate, interstate, or outside India, and how is the input tax rate flowing in that situation.